someone has a defective picker, that that their picker is just not working very well. How can I love myself when I don't love myself? So what we found is that you can love yourself for not loving yourself.
When I went from pretty dysfunctional, very dysfunctional relationships to very healthy ones, it's like I remapped. There's a different roadmap inside of me, I think.
Yeah, the relationship that you're in, what does that reflect about you? So what does that mirror to you?
Hello, my Katie.
Hello, Sophie. I love you against your background today. We both got really vibrant colors on today. Oh, I love it. Oh, yes.
Flower against my garden behind. It's all
yes, and the blooming, the possibility of things blooming, year round.
I love that. What a beautiful metaphor. It's funny because it kind of fits with what I wanted to bring to our plate today, which is I was working with a young woman this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and she kept describing these relationships, like one with a guy who drinks too much and one with a guy who's not available and one with it felt like they had different faces and slightly different environments and contexts, but it felt very similar in vibe. And that made me want to talk to you because I actually was, in our beginning of our relationship, that's one of the things that touched me and moved me so deeply was how do you know to pick people and recognize, like, because I remember how when we met, there was someone else in the group and you didn't have as much as a connection with the other person. And you knew, and you were right. Like it was completely unknown at the time you picked up on something.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, how would she know that? So I really would like to bring the topic of like, how do we pick people? Why do we tend to pick similar people? And I thought that would be an interesting place for us to start.
Oh, yeah. I love that whole idea of it's what Gay sometimes talks about when he's working with people, that someone has a defective picker, that their picker is just not working very well. Mm-hmm. And, my sense is that at the root of that is an experience that you got pickled in your environment, whether that was your family or what was going on in the culture or a combination or things that have been handed down through generations of here's the framework, here's who's available for you, here's what's possible. And if we don't see the possibility, for example, of being appreciated, instead of criticized all the time, so if whatever we saw going on, we really learned from that about here's how relationships are supposed to be. So if there's some kind of abuse or even just, not really connecting, so it could be like people are just doing their jobs and, basically, taking care of the family, but there's no real, lively connection. That's what you'll learn. And we've seen so many times where people have picked someone and think that they're picking somebody different, and it turns out to be the same old pattern. And so what I invite people to do is to look at what you most complain about in your relationship. I find that's a really, what do you find yourself keep coming back to complaining about? And then how is that familiar? To me, that's a real blossoming question of, okay, how is this whole thing familiar? Because very often they're completely oblivious to, oh, that's exactly what my parents did, or, oh, that's exactly how my brothers interacted with each other. And, what you see becomes so much a part of the matrix that it becomes invisible.
Wow. I mean, there's so much in what you're saying, because you're also speaking to my level of deservedness almost, or my level of what can I receive? Like when you said, what am I supposed to do? Or what, like matching my life to what I believe I deserve and what is possible feels like entire world I would want to talk about.
Right. So what I hear you talking about is scarcity.
Yeah.
And I think that in most people's relationships, they're operating from scarcity. Like there's not going to be anybody for me. I'm not, smart enough or thin enough or, pretty enough or whatever it is. I'm not enough. And that kind of scarcity. And then you pick from that kind of scarcity, like, oh, I can only have a little nibble, rather than the whole feast.
Let's follow that trend. So then we pick someone. I mean, historically, I picked people. I wasn't a very good picker, as you know. I've picked a couple of with that face you made,
Yeah.
not necessarily very supportive or very appreciative, or which definitely felt very familiar. But then now I am with someone that's very much someone who really, our lives is about appreciating each other and appreciating our lives together. And so how does that evolve? Like what happened?
Well, when I first saw one of your former partners, I could immediately, when I sort of tried on his presence inside me, I felt a jangle.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking for is, are people in integrity? And that doesn't mean are they good or bad, but are they in alignment? And I could tell that this guy was not in alignment. Then there was something that was making him, feel like a funhouse mirror. Like, I think I'm seeing this, but it's kind of distorted. And because I've been practicing integrity for so many years, I can actually feel it. It's not something that I even need to see. I can feel it in another person because it is the structure from which I come. Mm-hmm. And so if I were feeling unworthy or hadn't really kept my agreements and hadn't been operating in honesty, and authenticity all these years and in appreciation, I would be much more available to drop right into, whatever, complaining or seeing other people as the enemy. So we're so influenced by our environment. In fact, that was one of the, back when I was first studying psychology many, many decades ago, one of the seminal articles was really about the influence of our environment is way more important than our parents, than our siblings, so what we surround ourselves with. And so the system, we fit into that because that's how we operate, is to get attention, I'm going to fit into this particular system. And so if that means I have to be quiet or I have to be less than, so in my case, in order to get attention, I went for being super responsible, because maybe that would get me some attention. And what that did was just get me more things to do. My mother would say, would somebody please? And somebody was always me instead of my two brothers. So we learn the ways of getting some kind of attention. And then that becomes a template for us. And so the first thing that I really like to explore with people is, does this reflect to you the relationship that you're in? What does that reflect about you?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mirror to you? So like if you get interrupted or, somebody criticizes you. So looking at what you complain about and then what's familiar. And then where did you learn that? Where did you learn that? Because it also lets us know that if you learned that, you can learn something different. It's not like you're just stuck. This is the way you are. It's actually, we're so malleable, especially as kids, but actually all lifelong. And you can actually learn something new.
That's really powerful. The only place where you not lost me, but I'm a little more like, how do we do that? Is when you spoke to your own, like you felt it. Mm-hmm. I feel like I experience it a little bit more auditory, like in my ear. There's a sound when I'm in presence of someone that's not in integrity.
Oh, that's so great that you would say that, because your senses, we each, our receivers are a little bit different. And so I'd love it that you can hear it, because I can hear it also. I can hear it the moment somebody speaks. I can hear that they're authentic. Like the way I always receive you is that you're directly sharing what you're experiencing, and there's a flow there. There's no blockage. There's no narrowing. But when I hear people, I can hear, oops, took a little detour there. Oh, there's a secret there. Or, so I understand the tone. How do you experience that has been helpful to you?
I I hear it as a bell almost, like how when a bell rings correctly, there's a coherence
And
and
a resonance.
a resonance, and it vibrates in a way that feels like my heart responds to it almost. And then when I'm in the presence of someone it's in their voice often. I mean, it's almost like a metaphorical sound because sometimes they're not even speaking. So I think it's almost more of an energetic sound, if that makes sense. But I will feel like the bell just was like, "Wah," like something just went completely off in the way that bell was rung. And so it has for me, an auditory thing, although I think as well, there may be a sense, in their presence. But when you were describing how you were able to sense it, I immediately went to like, if we could bottle that and sell that, we would a lot there.
Oh, that's such a great idea. Well, that may be possible at some point. But what I'm thinking about as we're speaking is the whole idea of resonance, and when and a tuning fork. Because I often I'll use in my work, I'll use a tuning fork, and when the tuning fork can vibrate if there's nothing that's stopping the vibration. So, but if you're speaking and you have a secret or a withhold or something that you're judging, it will literally dampen the vibration so that you're not fully resonating. Your instrument isn't fully resonating. And so you're likely then to pick somebody who vibrates at the same level. And that's, I think, what explains a lot of how people get together, because it might be that certain tone in the voice that reminds them of when they were in the kitchen with mom and she had just a little bit of attention for you. If you kind of hung around enough, you'd get a little bit of the scraps. So we will tend to just fit into whatever is familiar to us.
So maybe to go back to the question I sensed earlier, when I went from pretty dysfunctional, very dysfunctional relationships to very healthy ones, yet the one I'm in doesn't feel fully familiar from childhood. So one can really accompany it's like I remapped. There's a different roadmap inside of me, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I observed you over the years creating a new roadmap. And the roadmap, I think, came first from really valuing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the base, we've said for years that the base of almost all problems is fear and not loving yourself. Maybe not having any experience of loving yourself. That is, regarding yourself with value and with that sense of appreciation and being with yourself, and rather than beating up on yourself. I think somebody was sharing a while back that that humans have somewhere between 50 and 60,000 thoughts a day, and that most of them are negative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you're repeating to yourself, oh, there you go again, or oh, that was stupid, or when are you ever going to learn? We may not even be aware of that, dirge that's going on in the brain all the time because it's so familiar. So shifting that, being willing to learn to love yourself is, I think, the most challenging for people, because if somebody is not reflecting that to you and hasn't in your life, where are you going to get the idea of what is it to actually feel loved and cared for? And I've seen so many people who, when I say, would you be willing to love yourself? They say, yeah, if I knew how to do it. If I knew what you were talking about. And so one of the best things that I have found is to think of someone that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be, it may not even be a person, it may be an animal. Mm-hmm. It may be a place where you love to be. But you think of that and let yourself have the experience of loving that. And when you're having the experience of loving, you literally turn it towards yourself. You let it wash over you, or sometimes, it's just you can only handle like a little drop of it. And that's fine too. Like I give myself a little drop of love and then whoa, let that integrate. But that practice I find has been very effective for people. And also being around people who love you. Because if we're, if we have this habit, of feeling unlovable, we're much more likely to pick people who are going to continue that pattern. So breaking free of that is a really courageous move.
Which is a little bit of the conundrum, because if I attract the ones that match my low level of self-love, then of course it confirms they behave in a way that says, yeah, you're right. I'm really not a good person like you, or I'm not lovable, or so I attract these people. So, but you're saying we can almost start it, we can break the pattern both ways. We can start by loving ourselves more. We will start attracting people that do acknowledge us more. But also we can start using that's what I did with you. I feel like when I first met you and Gay, there was the buckets of love coming. And I remember feeling the experience of like, whew, like this is a lot of love. And I would, I accepted it and I welcomed it and it helped me grow. But there was definitely what is that? Like, what is this?
And also the overwhelm. Even as you're talking about it, your shoulders went up a little bit like, yeah. So opening up, the expanding your capacity to enjoy giving and receiving more love every day. That's kind of our daily mantra, is I'm willing to expand my capacity to give and receive more love every day. And then even if you just make one choice, of noticing somebody, when you're out in the world and they smile at you and you smile back and you let yourself receive that connection, those little choices really do accumulate and begin to create a different matrix. It's like when you're fermenting, like you're making yogurt, or you start with something, and when you put different ingredients in it, it turns into something else, even though it might have just started out like all of the different kinds of breads that there are from the same ingredients. But when you add different things and you let yourself really receive, but also exchange, the willingness that seems like just unthinkable. Like how can I love myself when I don't love myself? So what we found is that you can love yourself for not loving yourself. That actually love is so big that it can include everything. So it can include like, oh, I love myself, all of the ways in which we sabotage that. And then you can love yourself for sabotaging. But that actual feeling, what I keep coming back to is that sometime in your life, you've had an experience of harmony and of connection and of feeling safe and being able to relax into connection. And having that as a kind of a touchstone, I think is really, really valuable.
As you're describing this feeling, I remember how often I would notice, like someone would say something kind to me, and I would say, if only you knew me. That was my, like I basically was saying, I'm hiding.
You would wipe it out. You would
definitely wipe out their compliment for sure. But it always landed in this place of like, well, wait, and I'll do something, you'll get to see.
You'll get to see who I really am.
Exactly. But I remember the shift, not surprisingly, not that long ago. I mean, maybe, 20 years into my adult life, so maybe 10, 15 years ago. I remember when something said something not very kind. And I went, oh, you really don't know me at all. Like I had shifted that if someone were to see something like they was questioning my value or something, and I was like someone just said to me, you kill people for pleasure. And I'd be like, what? Like that? No, it did not land as it would have before. I would have been like, yeah, exactly. Like I'm this horrible person of sorts.
Oh, what a great a marker for you to notice, a real milestone. And also I love it that you were able to say no That's not me.
Mhm.
Which I think many people are really haven't had the experience of saying, wait a minute, no, here's who I am.
Yeah.
This doesn't fit for me. Because, if we had said that as kids, there would have been consequences.
Yes.
So like being ignored or being punished, or like, and if I thought well about myself, my mother would very quickly say something, to make me feel less than.
Mhm.
Like, well, you're still too fat, or
Mhm.
you're, I don't, that thing that you're wearing, is really ugly, or you're not paying attention to other people. You're not the most important person in the room. So her idea was, was really an upper limit,
Mhm.
and trained me to like, oh, don't be too much. So I think when you multiply that times 1,000, the messages that we get are really, don't be too much
Mhm.
of yourself.
I love that as you were describing that, you were almost having like you were looking as if it was harder for you to remember what
I
you
couldn't remember. I was trying to find
so
aga,
good.
aga.
Because I know how present that has been in your life, this outer gaze at you that's so critical, but you were literally like, she would say, like it wasn't really in your DNA.
Right. I couldn't come up with a zinger.
That is perfect. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. So, as we increase our level of love, we're going to start attracting people that are more reflective of that very love. And then maybe that
Exactly.
is what we use to say, oh, well, like that's what happened again when I first met you. I was like, well, I really love Katie and I really respect her. And clearly she hangs out with pretty cool people. If she says those things about me, okay, maybe there's something to that. Like I started, because I experienced you as not a liar. So if you're not lying and you're seeing those things and you're also very astute, so it's not like I could hide, from you. I couldn't,
Right.
my goodness, and that started to build like I remember I would do something and I would be like, well, yeah, that's how Katie thinks of me. So, all right, all right. So then let's start, and I
Mm.
would start behaving at a higher vibration and therefore attract, higher vibration people and things.
That's wonderful. What it reminds me of too is that when people are practicing something new, particularly with regard to other people, I like to invite people to practice with somebody cares for you.
Yeah.
Like, don't practice with your family, like especially your family of origin. Practice with somebody really likes you or loves you. And in that way, you get challenged in a positive way. So the old stuff is really familiar, criticizing yourself, judging yourself, whatever the pattern is. When you start deliberately choosing
Hmm.
to not listen to that and to shift, it is, in my experience, thousands of shifts from, wait a minute, no, that doesn't fit anymore.
Hmm.
And it really fits also with what what I'm focusing on right now is shifting all of our old stories. We have so many dysfunctional old stories in our culture,
Hmm.
and one of them is, um, you're really not as good as you think you are. And just tone it down, calm down,
Hmm.
and let yourself fit in. Don't, it's really the upper limit. Don't be a tall poppy,
Hmm.
because you'll get by the culture, and that happens.
Hmm.
So we look around and we see that, and so to actually have the courage to love yourself, to say, I'm worthy, I'm valuable, that's a pretty big deal that needs to be repeated over and over.
There's another element that I find sometimes, I'm going to call it narcissism, not from a, pathological necessarily, like just behavioral, let's just say, where people, like I was in a relationship where the person I was with did the did the right things to like would say very kind things and would, be very reflective of my goodness, so I would lean into it more and then
Yeah.
be more of it. And then all of a sudden it was used to they knew exactly what would bring me in, what would kick me out. There was just this and I'm very familiar with narcissistic behavior in my childhood. Let's
Yes.
be very clear about that. So that felt very familiar. But at the same time, how do I trust? Because the first few months really looked like the goodness and the, oh my God, I've shifted, I've changed, because look, this person is really doing all the things when really the person was doing all the things to manipulate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does one, I mean, I remember feeling very silly and very stupid that I didn't see it yet again because it was hidden better.
Exactly. So for me, that represents your learning, and then you get the next level of learning. It's not as if it's not as if you go 0 to 60 and then back to 0, that you're learning the next lesson, which is to discern authenticity. And that's where your ear can really come in handy, because there'll be a tone or a vibration, or you'll have a question, or feel your body just backing up a little bit and like, something isn't quite matching. And it's that alignment over and over again that's been so helpful to me, where I go, yeah, something. And I've had people go, oh, you're just being too sensitive. There's nothing going on. And I've heard that from so many people too, particularly women who've come in after, discovering that their mates or their partners have been having an affair. And they've explained, like, I asked him, I said, something's not going on here. I can tell something. Oh, no, you're just making it up. You're just being crazy. So we get really gaslit. That's really gaslighting. You're not hearing what you think you're hearing. You're not seeing what you think you're seeing. And so having someone who can really support not only your authenticity, but your seeing and your experiencing, like, yeah, that's accurate, can really, really be helpful. Unless they're also in their own, because you might pick friends who are also involved in,
deceit, like
in deceit, relationships that are not in integrity. So for me, the big question, whenever I'm in a consideration, is there anything in the integrity realm that I'm not practicing? And so I look at that first. Is there anything that I have withheld, or someplace where I'm not taking healthy responsibility, or expressing my creativity? And then from that inquiry, even if I'm not perfect, I'm really looking at me, taking a breath and supporting my own wholeness. And then I'll keep like, no, this doesn't, no, that's not it. Something's, no, I will persist, to an obnoxious level, because I'm not willing to abandon my own integrity.
It's funny that you're quoting that very thing, because when I first met you and you met someone I was with at the time, and you literally, as you hugged me goodbye, I don't know if you're going to remember that, but as you hugged me goodbye, you said, he's cheating on you. Like, and I was like, I didn't respond. I mean, I was like, wow, first of all, wow, like we just met, but I also knew enough and I trusted you already enough to let it in. But I didn't know at the time that it was true. But you know how long it took for me to actually, because you had planted a little seed probably. And all of a sudden the conversation started shifting and I started doing that thing of, wait a minute, like, what is that thing? And this was weird. Like, he went away there and there was some bizarre behavior, or money was spent in a way that I didn't understand, or any of that. A week later, completely explodes this thing that he was having an affair, multiple affairs.
Yes.
I mean, I'm happy to be, I don't talk about it that often, this feels good, to
I think it's really important, because that was a huge learning experience for you, in a place to shift into, I deserve a real person, a whole person, a person who's fully in integrity. And by that, I mean, they really are experiencing themselves as whole, lovable, valuable, but acting from particularly honesty.
Wow. I just, when moments like that occur, I'm always so grateful that I just, having you in my life is so, like, how does one do life without that kind of friendship and ability to see and be so honest and real and raw. And I mean, maybe that's why I was so wanting this show to happen, because they get to hear, people get to hear, this is what a true friend does.
Yes. I am so glad that well, the reason I could do that with you is because you were so fully you. You just came like, here I am wide open. And I actually had never met anybody who had the openness that you do. And so I felt completely comfortable to be real with you right away. And so it's your invitation through your presence. And I want that for everybody. And it can start with just one choice to be turning toward what's real, rather than what's familiar or what's comfortable. And then your ability to be with the feelings that came up and all the choices and the decisions, really to turn your life around.
I did.
Completely. But it does happen one choice at a time. For people to go, I couldn't possibly do that. That's like, leaping the mountain. Well, it really does start with, oh. And then when you shift toward really facing, then everything cascades from there in a direction of more reality and more connection and more love.
Oh, I was like looking at the clock, like, are we towards the end of the show? Because I feel like we've been talking for 2 hours or 5 minutes. I wasn't sure. But I feel like we really, I guess one of the invitations we could have for people to play with is small, like start listening. Like, is this thing sounding a little like a bell that's not fully, or is it seeing or showing or sensing in your body? Like, is there things that you might be ignoring?
Right.
You don't have to make a giant. Actually, I didn't leave the relationship, as you remember. I stayed, even knowing what I knew. I brought it back to the relationship to work on it and to explore together. Right. Took my responsibility for what I did to injure some of our intimacy, that he, felt like going somewhere else. And we stayed together for a while until it became clear that we had kind of gone around the block with what was available. So one doesn't have to be like, okay, well, then I have to completely remodel my whole life.
Yeah.
But start making these, I love the way you described that, just like that one choice, and then another one. And then somehow you find yourself on a different street altogether.
Exactly. And for me, the how I make the choice is this choice loving?
Yeah.
Is this choice loving for me?
Yeah.
When I try on this choice, do I feel more love? In other words, and also more being with myself, appreciating myself. And if I don't, that's not a good choice. So I might be making a choice because, maybe he'll like me if I'm just a little bit more like that.
Or maybe he'll change.
Or maybe he'll change. If I just do all of this work, maybe he'll change.
That is such a funny.
We do a whole show on that one.
Okay, thanks, good. So, anything in parting? I mean, this was so rich. I feel like you also were very clear on like steps we could take to start integrating ourselves.
Yeah, because it is. I think in so many ways, it is the fundamental question that each of us needs community in order to really thrive. Mm-hmm. We can't do it by ourselves, and having just one or two people, the way Gay says it, is having 3 to 5 people whose faces light up when you walk in the room. Mm. And so when people light up and you light up in their presence, those are the people that you want to be playing with and choosing to have more time with.
Oh, that's beautiful. Just in wrapping, if I may add, I remember not that long ago when my current partner, my love, came to pick me up, and he arrived from a place I didn't see. Like, he kind of was there faster than because I didn't see him arriving, but I turned around and there he was. And I was just like, it's funny that you'd speak of lighting up, because I literally was like it was such a joy that I was able to be so authentic in that moment. That is how much joy I felt, as opposed to maybe I would have felt the joy seeing the car arrive, and then he wouldn't have received as much of the juice.
I totally, and it's that,
Yes,
It's that expansion
exactly.
that, in the presence of real connection, we expand
Yes.
and we get more flow and more aliveness and more creativity. And I actually got goosebumps as I was just feeling you turning toward him. And even after all these years with Gay, I still, when I see him, I feel the same thrill. I have
I have
this
seen that many times from the
thrill that goes through my body.
Well, there you
And that's, I want everybody to have that.
after 40, what has he been? 40?
40, yes, we just finished celebrating our 43rd wedding anniversary.
See, if you want that in 43 years, start looking at your integrity and your commitments, because that is where you're building. I love you. I will
Love you too.